Welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. In 1999, today's guest took a photograph that would change his life and amaze the world. This photograph captured the tiny hand of an unborn child reaching from his mother's womb, grasping the finger of his surgeon during fetal surgery to correct Spina Bifida. The picture has been published in books, newspapers, and magazines around the world. The picture evoked such a powerful reaction from the public, it was inevitable the world would demand to know the story behind the picture. Today's guest was born in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a photojournalist and worked in the Middle Tennessee area, Nashville, for 19 years. And he has pictures published in Newsweek, USA Today, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, and many other publications. Our guest shares his unique story and represents another important voice in the broad mosaic of the Right to Life movement. I confidently believe you'll find today's show to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. Well, welcome to our guest, Mr. Michael Clancy.
Thank you, Brendan, for the opportunity.
Before we get started, I'd just like to mention the call-in phone number should you, our viewing audience, have any questions. The phone number is 617-708-3290. Well, Michael, could you share with your viewers your life growing up until the time that you had taken this picture?
Well, I was one of four siblings. I have a brother and two sisters, and we were a military family. My father and my stepfather, they were both in the Navy, and my parents, basically my stepfather and my mother raised us, since I was about 4. My parents divorced, and my stepfather and my mother, they were both alcoholics, and my stepfather was a child molester. So we grew up in kind of a tough home, and we moved every 3 years, so we didn't really get to know people. And we were, the 4 of us kids would kind of stick together, but it was a tough childhood. And I grew up, mad at God. I blamed God for what happened to us, and my stepfather being a child molester. It was a terrible situation, but like I said, I grew up mad at God, and I ran away from home a bunch of times, and at 16 I left for the last time, and worked in a bunch of different jobs. I finished the 10th grade, and I became a carpenter and worked construction, and eventually I started going to night school for photography, and became a photojournalist in 1988, and worked for 12 years, and I worked at a really small newspaper, the Review-Appeal in Franklin, Tennessee, and started freelancing. And I basically freelanced for the Tennessean newspaper out of Nashville. And I started working on a photo story about a church in the mountains of Appalachia. It was a Pentecostal church. And the pastor, I went up there a lot of times. It was about a 3.5-hour drive. They were really country people. And I'm from Tennessee, so I have relatives that are real country. I really related to them. But the pastor was like quid pro quo. When I would ask him questions, he would want me to answer questions. And he started questioning me about where I stood with God. And I told him about what happened to me as a kid. I have this thing about, it's an embarrassing thing to talk about being molested, but it's how I deal with it, And so I was real open with him and told him what happened. I told him I blamed God for it, and I didn't see, I always felt that some things are unforgivable, and this was just something that I would never be able to forgive, and he worked on me, that little pastor did, and eventually, I got my Bible out and started reading about their faith, and as I continued my trips and my visits to get, in-depth photographs, and eventually, I came to the Lord in May of 1999, and 3 months later, I received this assignment from USA Today. It was the first assignment I'd ever shot for them, and it was an incredible procedure on a child in the womb at 21 weeks, and I was so excited about shooting for USA Today because they have 4.3 million circulation that it didn't really sink in the importance of the surgery, the graphic nature of the surgery, until actually the day before. And I realized I'm photographing an operation on an unborn child, and the surgery wouldn't really take that long. It was just a little over an hour. But you could tell going into the surgery that day that this was a very dangerous operation, that it didn't save the life of the unborn child. It's just to make the life better. It's just hopefully that it will reduce the disability from spina bifida. And an hour and 13 minutes into the surgery, Dr. Bruner, Joseph P. Bruner, he was the surgeon leading the operation, he made a comment, and you could just kind of feel the tension in the operating room lift. And you knew at that point that the dangerous part of the procedure was over. And the doctor, Dr. Noel Tulipan, was a neurosurgeon that did the actual repairs on Samuel's spine. They both backed away from the uterus, and Dr. Noel Tulipan asked me what speed of film I was using. And as I responded to 800 Fuji, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the uterus just shake. And it shook violently, and nobody was near it. I knew that it was shaking from within. And Dr. Bruner and I, we looked right at each other, and all of a sudden this little fist come flying out and was flailing back and forth.
The hand came out of the womb.
It came out of the surgical opening, yes, sir. And it was flailing back and forth, I mean, violently. And Dr. Bruner reacted, and he reached over, and he lifted the tiny hand. And as he touched Samuel's hand, I fired the first frame of a 4-frame motor drive sequence. You know, as fast as my camera would fire, I was able to capture 4 frames of actually the interaction between the doctor. Because after Dr. Bruner lifted Samuel's little hand, you can look on my website and see that the second frame is kind of like the pause before his reaction. In the third frame, Samuel squeezed back, and Dr. Bruner shook the tiny fist as if he was standing next to a baby's crib, testing for strength.
So Samuel actually, you feel that Samuel actually squeezed the doctor's finger, and that's what it looks like?
He absolutely did. It's evident in my photograph. And another thing, if you're a photographer and you're using a lens and shutter speed and your aperture, my camera was set at a 60th of a second because I didn't expect an action photograph. And so Dr. Bruner's hand is blurred in my picture, but Samuel's, his little knuckles are tack sharp in focus, and Samuel stopped the action in that photograph.
So what's the significance of that, of Samuel's hand being steady and the Dr. Bruner's being blurred?
That is actually Samuel squeezing back. He's winning the little strength competition. I mean, he's, without a doubt, he's stopping the action in the photograph.
I see. Wow, that's something. Now, let me ask you, why was 21 weeks versus 23 weeks or 24 weeks significant in this particular picture that you took?
Because at 21 weeks, that was the youngest in utero child that they would perform this procedure on. At 23 weeks was at that time in 1999. 23 weeks was the youngest preemie that had ever survived. So Samuel would never have survived if his mother had gone into labor, which is a natural reaction to a surgical interruption of the uterus.
Oh, is that right? Very interesting.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you, when and where was the picture initially published?
It published in USA Today September 7th, and USA Today and the Tennessean newspaper, who I normally freelance for in Nashville, they're both Gannett. They're both part of the Gannett chain. And the Tennessean found out, I told them about the picture, and they found out from Gannett corporate headquarters that the picture came out in focus, and they talked them into allowing them to publish it the same day. So the Tennessean and USA Today published that photo September 7th, 1999.
1999, I
Yes, sir.
see. And then when did you first get a notion, for instance,